All right, recently a few unsavory words have been exchanged between South Africa and Zimbabwe. While these exchanges have not been at a formal or governmental level, the two countries have seen a few remarks by those in power. First, it was reported that President Robert Mugabe criticized Nelson Mandela for securing political freedom that has still left much economic power in the hands of the white people in South Africa. To which, of course, the ANC General Secretary Gwede Mantashe responded that Mugabe has destroyed the economy of his own country. In response, Mugabe in a meeting in Zimbabwe last week said Mantashe reacted stupidly when he responded to his attacks on Nelson Mandela's legacy. Professor Tefo is a political analyst from the University of South Africa, and he joins us from our studios in Hatfield and Pretoria to take a look at the history and general relations between the two countries. Prof, good morning to you, and thank you so much for joining us on Morning Live.
Greetings to you, Karabo, and the listeners.
Thank you so much, Prof. Now, what's your view in all of this? I mean, some say it looks like it is a full-scale diplomatic war erupting between the two countries.
Yeah, well, a mismatch, if you were to call it that, between the two countries, and indeed extremely unfortunate given the history we've had with Zimbabwe. But the real challenge for me here is failure of African leadership to know when to bow out when the time comes. Otherwise, Mugabe would not be making this unfortunate statement. Remember, for some of us, Mugabe's voice was indeed messianic when we were at university. Samora Machel's voice was equally messianic when they were fighting for the liberation of this part of the continent, not necessarily of their own countries. So when you see them descending to this level, you just regret that indeed, when the time was beckoned, Mugabe didn't leave. He doesn't deserve what he's going through right now. Had he only knew when to leave and to step down. It's unfortunate indeed.
But these utterances, Prof, what do they do to the relations between two countries? In fact, let's take a look at governmental levels. How would you categorize the relationship between South Africa and Zimbabwe?
Mugabe is really biting the hands that feeds him. South Africa's shoulders are not too strong to carry the whole continent, let alone half of the population of Zimbabwe. He owes it to us to say, I thank you very much, for at least for the sacrifices the people of the country are doing, in as much as we are grateful for the contribution his own made. But right now, I think it's the ranting of an old man bordering on senility. And I'm sorry to say this, because I once held him with immense esteem when he was talking about Pabiri Ngochimrenga, and Samora Machel would say, Aluta continua, Victoria Certa. These people would have held a special place in history. And today, it's unfortunate. A man with 7 degrees, a man once the world celebrated so much, a man who gave this continent so much hope, a man who presided on the bread basket of the region, unfortunately was the man indeed who destroyed it. I mean, Zimbabwe is nothing but rubbles. It doesn't matter what other people may want to say to the contrary. But we certainly know, those of us who have been there on numerous occasions, including on the eve of the elections, of their independence, to say.
Which is exactly what the ANC Secretary General Gwede Mantashe said when responding to his remarks, of course, saying that Zimbabwe has in fact destroyed its own economy. But when you take a look at South Africa is continuing to create millionaires, including millionaires or Zimbabwean millionaires.
Indeed. I mean, look, to date, as a teacher, I can tell you, I have no doubt that even in the classes, in the school for legal practices, the students from Zimbabwe still do much better than our own. Zimbabwe, with all the challenges it faces today, their educational system is still better than ours. There's shining spots here and there. And these are the remnants of yesteryear, solid, well-run government. So there are good things. Unfortunately, they new brains to come in there. One example, I travel a lot across the continent, right? If you go to Nigeria, you go to Zambia, you go to Mozambique, they are today sustaining themselves when it comes to food security. And the main actors are those farmers who were kicked out of Zimbabwe. Zambia today is feeding Zimbabwe through the farmers who were kicked out of Zim. The land question could have been handled better. I'm not saying it shouldn't have been dealt with, but it could have been handled better. And we must try to find a way to live together lest we perish as fools.
Yeah, let's look back a little, Prof, to the incident of Minister Lindiwe Zulu, who was President Jacob Zuma's international relations advisor at the time when President Mugabe called him a street woman. Did it say anything about the opinions and perhaps power relations of Mugabe on South Africa?
Mugabe has always been harboring this jealousy that the continent's leadership seemed to be bestowing more respect on honor on Mandela than himself. That South Africa is generally regarded as a powerhouse of the continent, and rightly so. The economy, science, evidence is there for all and sundry to see. But unfortunately for the old man, he has always harbored this, and any opportunity to run down at least South Africa, he would not miss. Yet, when the chips are down, him and his family are quick to cross the border to come and seek assistance, refuge and solace in South Africa.
Yeah, and these, of course, these latest utterances, Prof, do they have any relationship or any way with how South Africa handled the Grace Mugabe issue? I mean, with some people saying that, good, it serves South Africa right. It's a good slap on South Africa's face.
It triggered that. Much as you and I have already spoken about the history, reasonably well documented, but the latest part has to do with that. Just the grounding of the aeroplanes in Zimbabwe. The reason for it was there was a document that ought to have been signed 23 years ago. It was not signed. Why did it wait? Right? For Grace to beat a young girl, a South African lady, with an electric cord, that we suddenly realize that there is an issue that ought to have been addressed 23 years ago. It was some sort of a tit-a-tat. But I argued yesterday, and I can even present here. I mean, unfortunately, it is about one man. Because if South Africa were to retaliate, Zimbabwe can't last for 24 hours without a lifeline from South Africa. Right? But at the same time, one must be mature and adult enough to recognize that you can't punish the whole country, especially because of an old man who has had his life behind him and is right now. But again, let's leave it at that, because there's people of Zimbabwe, you'll find them saying, indeed, at 93 or 96, he could still be their president. Yeah. It is for them, and they must live with the consequences.
Yeah, but do you personally think that he has always looked down on us here in South Africa? I mean, I remember there was a lot of reaction when President Mugabe said in Durban last year that Zimbabwe is the most highly developed country in Africa, only next to South Africa. What did you make of that statement?
Yes, indeed. Then you ask yourself, in which planet is he living? Because, best to who? Because he gets food from Zambia, from the very people he kicked out of his country. Half of his own population, right, is in South Africa and in SADC. Yet you still say, I'm presiding over a country whose economy or its development is second to South Africa. Right. Yeah. It is there that I'm saying perhaps we need a mental inspection of the old man. But is it necessary? That would also be a waste of resources. The old man has had his time. He should have left after 10 years in office. But he's overstayed, and he destroyed the legacy some of what us looked up to. A man who was inspirational. No. A man whose voice, when we were adversity, sounded messianic, I say.
Prof, due to time constraints, we'll leave it at that, but thank you so much for talking to us. All right, well, there you have it. That's Professor Lesiba Tefo, political analyst from the University of South Africa. Talk to us. Let's hear your views on that subject. Of course, at Morning Live, SABC's Twitter handle. Right.